In business today, three things to know. First, Janet Yellen and the Fed work their formula for the economy. But as they meet, will they need to change the chemistry? Then, stranded in L.A., containers at one of the nation's busiest ports go nowhere thanks to labor unrest and equipment problems. It's holiday sales, though, that could end up contained. And the battle for the states. While most are focused on Congress, the election of state governors could impact businesses far more. Rise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Faced with growing concerns over the European economy, but solid earnings news here, the U.S. Federal Reserve began its two-day monthly meeting. Janet Yellen and the Fed governors likely won't change policy, but the markets will look to see what they say between the lines. We'll know more about that tomorrow, and in just a few minutes, we'll preview what might happen. Ahead of that, though, the markets did rally. Triple-digit gains for the Dow, largely due to earnings news. The Dow up 187 points over the 17,000 mark once again. The S&P 500 up 23.5, and the Nasdaq also turning in a solid performance, up 78.36. Some earnings reports out today. Facebook reporting it beat expectations this third quarter. EPS coming in at 43 cents. That's just a bit above estimates. Spirit Airlines, however, reporting a slight miss on revenue in the third quarter, though EPS of $1.01 came out way ahead of forecasts. BP saying revenues of $95 billion were down 18% this quarter. We'll probably see more of that from oil companies as oil prices drop to its lowest level in years. BP's earnings per share of 99 cents, however, was about 10% above the consensus estimates. A recent study, meantime, also found that the 2010 BP oil spill left a stain ring the size of Rhode Island on the Gulf of Mexico seafloor. Taking a look at commodities, gold closing down $1.20 and oil edging up a little more than a quarter. For the second month in a row, orders for durable goods dropped. The Commerce Department saying factory orders fell 1.3% in September. Prices for new homes are also rising at a slower rate. The S&P Case-Shiller 20-city index of home prices rose 5.3% year over year. That's down more than 1% from the previous month. But consumer confidence did turn in some good October numbers. The Conference Board says confidence rose to 94.5 on their index. So what will the message from the Fed be? Dan Weiner is the CEO of Advisor Investments and joins us once again here on the Rise Exchange. I guess we look for two things from the Fed. What will they do and what will they say? So let's start with what you think they will do.
Well, what they're going to do is what they're going to say, which is not a big surprise. QE3 is over. It ends in October.
They're going to pull back another $10 billion.
That's it. They're done. They're done buying bonds. And what they're going to say is nothing very different from what they've been saying, which is we're waiting to see the data that shows us that inflation is beginning to build. And we haven't seen inflation. I mean, the latest CPI number, 1.6, 1.7% inflation. It's not a lot of inflation. The labor market has gone where they would like it to go, and it continues apace. But inflation's not there. So we go down 6 months before
they raise interest rates at all. So we're not even looking at the first quarter of 2015 right now, I don't think.
Unless we have such a bang-up fourth quarter, and I just don't see it.
When they're looking at inflation, we've talked about this before, they're really looking at wage inflation mostly because you and I know that the prices in the stores are higher.
Right, but on the other hand, look at what's happened to gasoline prices, right? We've now seen, on average, gas is selling for less than $3 a gallon across the country. And there's an old metric that says for every penny that gas prices go down and stay down for a year's time, that adds $1 billion to the consumer's pocketbook.
That's what gas prices are a tax in essence. And so this is a little bit of a tax rebate. And there's evidence that the consumers take that money and spend it elsewhere.
Exactly. And it comes at a great time because Christmas shopping season's coming right up.
Okay, but you mentioned, and prices, by the way, come down as well when gas comes down, in theory, because it costs less to ship goods. But when you talk about gas prices, and part of the reason they say they're coming down is because the European economy is so weak. Does this factor at all into the Fed thinking right now what's going on in Europe?
Well, it doesn't directly factor into their thinking. What factors into the thinking is that if Europe remains weak, and we think that it's going to be a shallow and short recession there, if that remains weak, then demand remains weak, and then our economy doesn't rev up. You know, we're in a slow growth but not a no growth economy. We've been talking about this at Advisor Investments for years. And you're seeing that, and you talked about earnings. More than half the S&P companies have reported earnings now. and more than half of them have beat on earnings. But even more importantly, more than half of them have also beat on revenues. And if you remember, I've been on the show and talked about we wanted to see sales going up.
Top line revenues needed to increase instead of they're cutting their way to better earnings. But also, how much has share buybacks factored into these earnings reports, if at all, because that's kind of financial engineering.
That factors in some, but again, you can't use a share buyback to boost your sales.
Right. Also, and the Fed is smart enough to read through that.
That's right. And so is Wall Street.
Okay, you mentioned some of the economic numbers, though, because we still kind of get the seesawing of economic numbers, which is a sort of start and stop. Anything to concern yourself regarding factory orders? That was kind of the headline out of the news this morning on the business shows.
Yeah, the durable goods orders. I mean, look. Again, we tend to say don't look at 1 month's numbers. 2 months ago, as you may recall, you know a lot about airlines. 2 months ago, the durable goods orders number jumped. It doubled in 1
Boeing,
month.
Correct?
And it was Boeing. It was airplanes. And then, boom, you go another month and they're down again. You can't look at 1 month numbers. The trend says durable goods are up about 3.3, 3.5% year over year over the last year. And if you take out the airlines, which are so volatile, we're up about 7%.
What are you telling your clients to look for in the fourth quarter then?
We're looking for a rebound in stocks. We're going to see higher prices. Well, we've already seen some of it today, obviously. But we're going to see earnings now factor into PEs, right?
Do you think we got out of that mini correction sort of out of our system then when we had that big
Well, we
slide
still
2 weeks
haven't
ago?
had a 10% correction. Small stocks have. Small stocks are still more than or around 10% below their highs. But, after today's market, we're only about 2% below the highs for the Dow and the S&P.
Okay. Dan Weiner, CEO of Advisor Investments. Thank you so much,
thing.
as always. On Tuesday, Americans will go to the polls to vote for Congress. Now, while that vote could swing Senate control from the Democrats to the Republicans, there are many interesting races for state governors, which could impact people and business far more. Our Washington Bureau Chief, James Blue, is in D.C. with a preview. Good afternoon, James. What are the big races we should be watching here in the governor's house?
Well, Andrew, the big races are really in the state of Florida, where you have an incumbent Republican governor running against a former incumbent Republican governor. Charlie Crist has changed parties, is running as a Democrat, and really believes, as a state where Barack Obama picked things up during the 2012 election, that he can sort of ride that coat wave and do the same thing. Voters in Florida are really upset with Governor Scott. He's not been very friendly to the Hispanic and Cuban population there, and there's a really good chance, although they're tied now, that that race is going to go Democratic.
Yeah, Charlie Crist isn't particularly all that popular either, and of course we remember this was the big fan gate, where Charlie Crist showed up with a fan for the debate, and then Rick Scott did not. What impact do you think that could have? Because, we are talking about the Republicans taking control of the Senate, but the interesting story here is the Republicans may lose more governorships than they win.
Right, and the real issue is that for most elections, the candidates for president are actually formed and actually shaped in the states. And so if the Democrats are able to grab more states, that means that they will have a larger stable for presidential contenders in the coming years. Some of the other really important races and really some surprises, Alaska remains an open race.
And that's a big surprise. That's a heavily Republican state.
It's a heavily Republican state, and what has happened is you have a Democrat and an independent who have sort of come together and are running in the campaign there as sort of a duo, and it's the independent who has strengthened the Democratic candidate, and that it looks, potentially another place where the Republicans are going to lose.
And an independent may win in Kansas.
An independent may win in Kansas, and that's actually at the Senate level.
That's right.
He's actually a classmate of mine from college, and he made tons of money as a hedge fund guy, and decided, just because he was really, sort of pissed off with the way Washington was run, that someone who was centrist and independent might have a chance. And I got to say, if anyone had said to me that Greg Orman might be moving to the Senate, 25 years ago when we were in college, I would have said probably not.
Yeah.
But he's run a really good campaign. He's had no trouble with financing, and he's really rallied classmates around to try to get all of us to support him. And I think there is a chance that he is actually going to beat Pat Roberts.
What do you think of the fact that independents are sort of polling well this election cycle says about the environment, both on the state level and the federal level?
What it says is that there is a lot of dissatisfaction sort of with the direction of the country, with the way the country is being governed, all the expectations and hope of the Obama wave, and, there was the Tea Party Republicans for a while. Things are sort of in chaos and in crisis around the country, and people are looking for alternatives. And, at one point it was sort of the Obama alternative, then it was the Tea Party. Now I think you see that there are these centrist moderates, independents also, who think that they can provide a better way.
Okay, James Blue in Washington, D.C., thank you for the preview.
Thank you.
Coming up, stuck at the dock, how a fight in the shipping industry could impact holiday sales. You're watching Arise Exchange.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Informative, the U.S. economy is on the right path, and the wizard of the Fed is leading the way.
We started our companies originally to create something that made a positive difference.
Compelling.
I became very successful, not allowing myself to be average.
Our favorite person of the day when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reason. Yeah, he sort of lost all business. Investors came back from the long weekend tanned, rested, and ready to buy stocks. Entertaining money daily, Arise Exchange. And welcome back to Arise Exchange. Just in time for the holiday season, we have major shipping delays. Experts in the shipping industry are calling the extensive congestion at the nation's busiest ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, California, the worst they have seen. And retailers are beginning to feel the pain as they try to stock store shelves, and that means consumers will feel the pain next. Joining us by phone with more on this crisis and its impact is Harry Moser. He is president of the Reshoring Initiative, a nonprofit working to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Harry, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Pleasure to be here.
So give us a picture of what is going on here and why there's this logjam out west.
Okay. Well, as of October 22nd, there were 5 container ships anchored waiting to unload, and normally there's 0. Normally they come right in and they unload. So that's thousands and thousands of containers. In addition, there are ships that have gone to what's called slow steaming. So they cut their speed maybe in half, which saves them fuel, so they save money, but there's no sense in arriving and anchoring and then sitting and waiting for weeks until they can unload. So severe problem, major causes. One is sort of economic or logistical. There are not sufficient chassis which the truckers would use to move the containers away from the port. That's a logistical problem, the fault of various people there. Another possible cause, and this hasn't been proven, is a slowdown by the dock workers who have been in extended contract negotiations for months.
Yeah, and we've had labor unrest at these ports before, several years ago.
Correct.
All right, so now what is the impact here on basically getting these products then into the hands of consumers? I mean, I guess if they're sitting out there, everyone's costs are going up.
It's not just costs going up. The bigger problem is that the product perhaps doesn't get to the store shelf in time for Christmas.
Is there,
or for Thanksgiving or Halloween or whatever it is that it's coming in for. That's the major problem, because if you don't get it there in time, then the product is discounted 50% or something, or almost given away.
Am I right to say because it's the West Coast that a lot of this are coming from Asian countries?
Of course.
Okay. So what then is it also a case that maybe these ports are no longer the right size? Are we bringing in more goods through these ports than before?
I think that most of the time they don't have this problem, so I think they have the capacity to do it when they organize this issue on the chassis and they get the workers back to being productive again. I think it's overcomable, but what's going to happen is the two ports that we're talking about are going to lose volume. That's Los Angeles and Long Beach are going to lose volume to ports like Prince Rupert up in British Columbia, which you can go by rail from there down into the U.S. And eventually the boats are going to be coming through the Panama Canal and coming up to East Coast ports, and so eventually the workers there will cut off their nose to spite their face.
Well, that's an interesting statement. So there is some competition out there for these ships to go somewhere else. First, do the workers have, what is their basic economic complaint, and do they have any legitimacy on these arguments?
I don't know the details of their complaint, but my understanding, every time I've read about it, is that they're making $150,000 a year. So it's not, compared to most people, they don't have a complaint.
Okay. Harry Moser, president of Reshoring Initiative. Thank you so much. We'll have you back on later to talk about where we stand on all of this.
Thank you, Andrew.
Time now for our business ticker. Stories making headlines across the nation and the world. President Obama says the U.S. must support healthcare workers in West Africa, and new rules for monitoring them for Ebola once they return should be, quote, sensible and based on science. This after Governors Christie and Cuomo of New Jersey and New York instituted controversial quarantines in their states. The president's brief remarks came after speaking with U.S. aid workers on the front lines of Ebola in West Africa. He also reminded Americans that only 2 people have contracted the disease in the U.S., and both are now disease-free. Recalls at General Motors will likely mean smaller bonuses for its factory workers. The automaker made nearly no profit in the first 6 months of the year because of recall costs related to its faulty ignition switches, totaling $2.5 billion. It is also funding a victims' compensation program that to date has 30 death claims. These costs will affect how the company calculates profit sharing for factory workers, who were each paid about $7,500 in bonuses last year. Meanwhile, GM is moving production of a critical part of its Chevy Volt hybrid from Mexico to Michigan. And the other auto news of the day, Elon Musk of Tesla is taking on the Wall Street Journal. The Journal is reporting that Tesla is offering better lease pricing to boost sagging sales. Musk responded with a tweet, quote, "The article in the Wall Street Journal regarding Tesla sales is incorrect. September was a record high." Tesla reports earnings next week for the quarter that ended in September. Although no country in the world has closed the gender gap, some are doing better than others. According to the World Economic Forum's annual gender survey, increased access for women to politics and the workforce has reduced the gap in the last decade. But it's going to take another 80 years to actually close the gap when it comes to pay. The report ranked 142 countries, with Iceland topping the list and Yemen coming in dead last. The U.S. ranked 20th overall and 65th on pay. And take a look at this. A windowless plane may take off within the next 10 years, but even though it won't have windows, it will have a great view. The plane's cabin walls would have high-definition, flexible screens to show what's happening outside, giving the illusion that the entire plane is transparent. But it's not just about the panoramic view. The walls would be thinner and stronger, as well as less expensive to make, which could lead to less costly flights. Better views. Ahead, how a sugar daddy website helped 2 teenage girls become our favorite people of the day. You're watching Arise Exchange.
One of the great things about Arise News, it is truly a multicultural global channel that is paying attention to communities of all different kinds, not just here in the United States, not just in Africa, but all around the world, as we're giving a voice to the people that don't traditionally have the kind of a voice that a mass media organization can have. You're getting here at Arise News that you're not going to find at the other networks is a unique perspective, and I think that's part of what Arise is here to do.
Arise serves underserved communities by bringing them news, information, sports, and entertainment from places that are becoming part of the world economy, that are becoming a part of the world voice, and decisions that are affecting things in the world that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about safety and security. And if you come to Arise and you watch our broadcast, these are the things we're going to bring to you every day, 24 hours a day.
I think that people in America do care about what happens throughout the world.
Global warming is probably something that has to be addressed sooner rather than later.
From Somalia and the genocide there, and that's something people don't know about. They have no idea the brevity of that situation.
The first thing I think about when I think of Africa is like war and famine and disease.
And right now with the tsunami that happened or the earthquakes in, Japan, we always look out for other people.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Time now for our favorite person of the day when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reasons. Today, it's two teenage twins accused of robbing an 85-year-old New York City man who they met on a sugar daddy website. Shayna and Charlene Foster, both 17, allegedly met 85-year-old Paul Aronson at his home for dinner. Police say after Aronson gave a tour of his home, the young women tied him to a coffee table with zip ties and then robbed him. The three met on the website seekingarrangements.com, don't pretend you haven't heard of it, which is a sugar daddy site. And there's sections called Sugar Daddy Perks, Be Pampered, and No Strings Attached. Except if you get tied up, of course. The Daily News reports that while Aronson spent 20 hours tied up, the teens were off buying makeup with his credit cards. The women are charged with kidnapping, assault, and larceny. You can make your own judgments about Mr. Aronson. And so, Charlene and Shayna Foster are our favorite people of the day. Next, the crusade for financial literacy. That means independence. Pastor DeForest Soaries joins us in a moment. Next on Rise Exchange.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Song Hai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
There's certain news programs that have a Democrat and a Republican, and all they do is, here's the Democrat saying his side, and the Republican say, it's a little debate show, but not everybody is a sort of an extremist on one side or the other. People are in the middle a lot more.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Last week on Arise Exchange, the nauseating numbers from two iconic brands and whether they have a plan to turn around their businesses. Existing home sales surged to their best numbers. Can the broader markets support that in the real estate business?
When long-term interest rates are low, it's usually a bad sign for the macro economy.
Toys R Us is defending its decision to sell Breaking Bad action figures. The toys come with a detachable sack of cash and a bag of meth. Not real meth, fake meth. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange. Americans love to ring up debt, and African Americans are more likely to use those credit cards in unwise ways. Why? Pastor DeForest Soaries is launching a new financial literacy campaign to help everyone get on the path to financial freedom. He is also the author of D-Free, Breaking Free from Financial Slavery. He joins us here on Arise Exchange. Welcome back to the program.
Well,
always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for being here.
Tell us a little bit about this conference that you're going to host from November 6th to November 8th.
Well, for the last few years, we've been actually teaching churches how to use a strategy to help their members manage their money better, starting with the elimination of debt. Prudential did a study, and 4 out of 5 African Americans say that their number one financial priority is to get out of debt. When you're in debt, you can't save. When you're in debt, you can't invest. When you're in debt, your stress levels are high. your tolerance level is low, marriages are threatened. And so we start with debt, and every year we invite the churches that we're working with and the ones who'd like to get involved to come together. And so next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, November 6th through 8th, we'll have a training session for church leaders. We'll have workshops for those same leaders who are dealing with their own financial issues on writing wills, on improving their credit scores. And we'll have a celebration of people that have done a great job at this work.
And this will take place where in New Jersey?
It'll take place at the church that I've served for 24 years, First Baptist Church in Somerset, New Jersey.
What are the reasons that you think that, according to the studies, African Americans have a worse debt problem than the rest of Americans, and Americans generally have a pretty bad debt problem?
Well, the gap between African American wealth and non-African American wealth is wide, but the appetites are the same. And so what happens is people use credit cards often to make ends meet. People use credit cards to get things they want, whether they need them or not. People are more likely to go into debt if they don't have savings and if they don't inherit money from previous generations. And so the African American financial situation lends itself to people using debt as a strategy for survival. However, the fact is, regardless of one's income level, how we use the money we have determines how well we do in the future.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that in a moment. When you speak to churches about this, do you get, and you've done this for quite a few years now, obviously, do you get pushback from the churches? Say, you know, we are a spiritual institution. We don't get involved in people's finances.
Oh, my goodness. Jesus said in the Gospel of Luke, who would build a tower without first counting the cost? The translation, have a budget. Before you go out and buy a house,
so you were this is something that has become more and more welcoming, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Then. I mean, the plight of African-American churches around the country is very fragile. Churches are living from Sunday to Sunday the way members are living from paycheck to paycheck. And what we want people to know is that more money doesn't solve the problem. I mean, the minimum wage in the NBA is $375,000 a year, but 60% of them
are bankrupt. Or
within 3 years of retirement.
Yeah, it's astounding. And that, as I'm sure, one of the tools you teach
no question
is
about
that no matter what you're earning, if your appetite, if you will, goes exponentially up with it, you're going to have the same problems.
That's where it starts. Now, the fact is, many people just need more money. You can cut back on your cable plan. You can cut back on your cell phone plan. Some people just need more money. And a part of our curriculum that goes along with this book is teaching people how to assess their strengths, how to market their skills, and how to generate income in ways that are non-traditional.
Okay, so walk us through, like, the program. What will people learn, and when they walk out, what tools will they have to be able to do this?
Well, what we've learned in the first instance is people just don't know where to start. Whether you're drowning in debt or whether you'd like to invest more money or own real estate, you have to get started. And so we have level one, get started. Write down all of your expenses. Write down all
what
of
you're
your
spending.
bills.
It's amazing how many people don't know what they're spending.
They don't know what they're spending.
Basis. Yep.
And so track your expenses and then begin identifying spending leaks. You may not need 800 TV stations. You might be able to get by with 24. You may not be able to afford $4.50 for coffee every morning. It all adds up. Studies show that you can save $112,000 just by bringing your lunch to work. And so perhaps you bring a sandwich to work. So level one is just get started. Get started along the path of financial freedom. Level two is get control. Have a budget. Do a spending plan. Pay down your bills. Start from the smallest debt, the snowball method. Dave Ramsey and I agree on this. Pay off your small debts first and celebrate. And then get ahead. Make sure you're well insured.
There's a recent, we have about a minute left. There's a recent study that younger people are starting to get by without credit cards. They're not using credit cards as much. Are you encouraged by this trend?
I'm encouraged, but it's not dominant. The fact is we have $1 trillion in student loan debt. The student loan debt crisis is looming, and those are young people borrowing to go to college. We have a lot of emphasis on community colleges, on going to college part-time, on working your way through school.
And do you find that a lot of people who want to start their own businesses cannot because they are straddled by debt?
Absolutely. Credit scores are low. SBA can't give you loans if your credit is bad. You have no money to invest as equity. It's hard to attract investors if you're in debt. And so we don't believe people should not consume, but they should consume. We should consume within the context of our capacity. My expertise does not come from academic experience. My expertise comes from living on credit cards for 15 years and getting out.
Pastor DeForest Soaries, thank you so much.
Thank
the
you.
author of D-Free, Breaking Free from Financial Slavery. Tomorrow on Arise Exchange, a huge tax break for one wealthy man. Why the new LA Clippers owner, Steve Ballmer, may get a $1 billion tax break from Uncle Sam. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. Good night.